Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. I've been told...
Sounds like you're trying to force an upbeat attitude into the episode from the get-go.
I've been told that I am not upbeat enough on these podcasts, and I need to cheer the fuck up.
By who?
By whom?
By interested third parties.
Yes, exactly.
Have given anonymous, but also not anonymous feedback to George about his personal and private conduct, not public conduct, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it was you, Adam, is what you're saying.
No, it's probably no. I haven't said shit. I think it was probably
a party who shall remain nameless said, "Cheer the fuck up, you dour son of a bitch." It's really bumming me out listening to your show.
It was George to himself in the mirror.
In the shower.
I was weeping with my shorts on. So we are a show about newsy type stuff and things. Generally, we tend to focus on Australian politics because that is the most trash. Sometimes we also talk about American politics when that's not infrequently trash as well. So you feel free to join us on the live stream. If you're listening after the fact, we typically tend to record from 4 o'clock-ish on Sundays on Twitch.
Very ish.
It is very ish. But make sure you follow us at Unnatural Show on Twitch if you'd like to watch and comment live, as so many people do. And
we will respond to it 10 minutes after the fact, to which point we've already moved on. And but we will address your concerns, even if we don't understand what you're referring to.
Oh, the most common response from us is, "Huh? What? What?"
Yeah. Probably because it's a really quick reply to something we were saying at the time.
And
we don't remember what that was.
The comment's like, right on, bro. And I'm like, I don't know what you're agreeing with because it's minutes later at this point. But thanks.
Yeah, don't know what you're agreeing with, but I'm going to choose what it is and say thank you.
Thank you. So what? It's been a great week. Nothing happened. Everyone was happy. Lots of good stuff happened to good people who deserved it. So thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.
Nah, it's been a beautiful week. I don't know. Should we, I guess, be focusing on the more local stuff for Australia? There's a lot of bullcrap going on. I don't know where to start. I mean, because we're in Victoria and there's been a shit ton of protests leading up to, legislation on pandemic powers for our local government, which have now passed. And so the protests have escalated.
Still protesting. They're just in Ballarat now.
Yeah. It's just all being a bit chaotic and insane, which is always a lot of fun. Our politicians are dropping like flies, either by being forced out or they're just quitting ahead of the next election. And the priorities of our government are absolutely cooked. Like, making sure that religious people can still be mean to gays.
The important stuff.
The important shit. Not, dealing with a climate crisis that, I don't think I shared this in, that we may be lying about how badly we're affecting the environment around. So that's good.
They've always been fudging with numbers.
But it's something like scientists have been monitoring like CO2 emissions from like specifically mines in Queensland, and it's like the equivalent of a medium-sized European country's CO2 emissions just from there.
So the size of Matt Canavan's ego as well.
Hello. Talk about hot air. Got him. Zinger.
Boom.
Oh, Adam waited for the end of the political sitting season to get that one out. Holy shit, Adam. How long have you been hanging on to that one?
A while. But look, it's interesting, guys, because...
sorry, go on.
I was going to make a segue. Now I'm going to ruin the segue by saying that I'm actually making a segue. Do you want to make a comment about that, George?
Just that, there was this great interview on the ABC podcast called The Signal where they were interviewing this guy talking about, basically his argument was like, we should spend more money on just monitoring CO2 correctly, because if we do that, then that's actually going to have much more of an outsized effect, like knowing what our actual CO2 levels are, because they're obviously nowhere near what we think they are or what we're alleging they are. would have a greater impact on the reduction of CO2 emissions over time than some of these bullshit initiatives that the federal government has put together.
It's almost like CO2 emissions. The calculations are done by actual accountants, and the accountants are the guys that basically make you cheat on your tax return, right? So.
It's the equivalent.
It's the equivalent of it, right?
Treasury is saying to the government, "You probably drove like 5,000 k's a year to see clients last year, didn't you?" And the government's like, "Probably. I don't know. Let's claim it. Can we get away with that?" Yeah, you probably spent
in the rundown.
You probably spent like $4,000 probably on expenses to do with your work setup working at home setup and your computer. You probably spent like $3,000 on electricity, right? Yeah, let's just put it all down, whack it on there.
How many cows are in Australia? How many cows can we calculate the methane predictions on? Oh, maybe like a billion.
Half a dozen.
Six. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we'll put it down as look. We'll round up. We'll say it's 100 cows. That's probably right.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. So, yeah, the fucking priorities of our federal government are very all over the shop. I don't know, where do we want to start? Do we want to start with the old religious discrimination?
Well, we talked about that last week. The thing that I was going to segue
did
to
we?
was,
Yes, we did. I'm at the wrong rundown. No, yes. Segue away, Adam.
The segue away that I was going to go to was as an online troll.
Hang on. Sorry, before you do that, can I I don't know if this is a joke or a reference. I just made me think of the Enya song. Seg away, seg away, seg away. It's just a half a thought. It's not even a full joke. Just wanted to put that out there.
Right, put it on the board. We'll come back to it.
Put a pin in it.
No, but look, George, you said that I'm a bit of holding on to fire some big guns away for this political sitting. But the government, if they have their way, will not let you do that. So maybe I could be classed as an online troll under that sort of definition. And they've got legislation underway to stop online trolls.
So you're telling me
anonymous trolls.
Anonymous trolls
is the bullet point here, because Adam, I don't know if you realize this. We've been calling you by your real name, and I can see your face right now. So if you were attempting to become some kind of masked Mr. X online vigilante, spilling the secrets and criticizing people in power in pure anonymity, you've ballsed it up. You've really cooked it.
So I probably should have been wearing a mask or something for the last 10 years. Is that what you're saying?
Adam understood that this was a recording of The Masked Singer. Was that not correct? It's just been going on for 10 years.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be the fish that's like singing. Okay, yep. No, look,
paycheck's in the mail. It's definitely coming.
Great. Okay. So this is Tom. You posted this article late last week, but it's an interesting one because on the one hand, it's like, it's actually doing something which would address, I guess, or go towards perhaps creating more responsibility to people. It's the classic liberal online
way of making legislation, which is to, even when they do something good, they do it for dumb reasons in a horrible way.
It's very interesting because I think as Adam, what you were saying there is that. So all right, let's get into the crux of what they've actually suggested, right? And the legislation that they've drafted would essentially require, and I'll quote the ABC here, to require social media companies to collect the details of all users and allow courts to force them to hand over the identities of users to aid defamation cases.
Right.
This is coming hot off the heels.
Love every aspect about this. I love that the social media companies are collecting my data and storing it. I love that the government can just throw them a request to unmask me, and now that there is a pipeline for government defamation action to be levied against social media users for things they say in passing about public figures on the internet. I love the whole value chain is just fantastic here. Love what they've done.
It is great.
Love
the courts would have to do it. It's not necessarily the government just is able to snap their fingers and have it happen, like through a court order, but no, the point still stands. So this is hot off the heels of what we talked about a bit last week, where Mr. Potato Head himself won his defamation case against a rather not, a fairly lower profile activist just making a quickly deleted tweet.
Sorry, just to clarify, I for one love Peter Dutton, and I, George Salvatore Tsipos, born in 1991, do not think that Mr. Dutton has the head of a potato. That is obviously incorrect factual information. He's obviously a legend, and we all love him on this.
It
on
is
this show.
just it's just a
not a
held
rape
belief in the
apologist.
and definitely
No, and
not a
not.
rape
I
apologist.
definitely want to stress that Peter Dutton is not a rape apologist. As we saw from that defamation case last week, the finding was against Shane Bowsey, who tweeted against him, who said he was a rape apologist, and that was found in his favor. So what we know for a fact is that Peter Dutton is not a rape apologist. And the last thing I want to do is make sure that Peter Dutton's name is associated with the words rape apologist for the rest of time. Okay, there's obviously never again, not appropriate. I don't know why you keep bringing up Peter Dutton and rape apologist in the same sentence, Adam. Okay,
I don't know why. It's just,
let's all forget about it. No one ever wants to hear the words Peter Dutton and rape apologist in the same sentence. We should never associate Peter Dutton and rape apologist in the same
somehow. Tom, just sort of
sentence ever again.
Wind it down. No, George.
George has control of everything. So yeah, this comes hot off the heels of that. And so while in that particular situation, Peter Dutton had the Shane who made the tweet, like it has his name attached to it and everything. So then that is how legal action was pursued. But as we know, people on the internet love to just have a random name with a shit ton of letters all behind it, or fart dealer 69 or whatever they want to have their online handle be. And criticize the government through and famous figures sort of through those kind of metrics. So this would further allow them to push for that.
The reason that Tom came up with Fart Dealer 69 is because there was an actual gamer person tag that we came across during our online gaming exploits.
Oh yeah, we keep a list of all those things, right? We have the Clit Fingers Hall of Fame.
Yep.
As to all the really disgusting yet kind of brilliant online handles that people use.
Yeah, so anyway. There's obviously Clit Fingers, Fart Dealer 69. What are some other highlights? Do you guys remember?
I can't remember any of them now that you've put him on the spot.
There was something like
some of them aren't appropriate, to be fair. They're a bit,
some of them
none of them are appropriate.
Quite awful. Fart Dealer 69 was great. Was there something like Pink Stink 420 or I don't know? It was just something dumb like that. Just absolutely shameful. Anyway, I keep getting off topic. So, but in the cases of people with not using their real names or anything like that, but then could be, that in the pursuit of wanting to litigate in a defamation sort of sense what people say online, that there could be precedent and legal proceedings to allow that unmasking to happen. And we've seen that starting to happen with all the Google review sort of stuff that we've talked about over time. Different people wanting to force Google to unmask anonymous Google reviewers who are saying awful things about small business, where they believe, hang on, I don't think you were even a client that I had and you're just being a piece of shit, whatever.
I have personal experience of something like that where someone posted at a business that I used to work at, posted images of a crack pipe and saying what's your hotel's all fucked up? It was a crack pipe in my cupboard. It's I looked at it, I was like, that's not one of our cupboards. I don't know, why are you doing this to my Tuesday? Why are you? What's going on?
Yeah, so and I feel that's the without going too deep, sort of probably into the nitty gritty of how the legislation might work. I feel that's the two sides of this that have kind of made me go, on the one hand, this is just to make it easier to pull the kind of shit that Peter Dutton did.
Yes.
And that's
else.
Bad. What all those people, they've been trying to do is that they're just we just want to frighten people into not speaking up against those of us who are on 6-figure yearly salaries and can afford to chase you and all that sort of stuff. Because while this would apply beyond just politicians chasing defamation cases, of course, there were some of the few people who have the pockets deep enough to afford it, right? But on the other hand, I can think, as then George's example's one, and I also know of people who, that have been repeatedly harassed by seemingly probably the same individual using burner accounts, and any time that we've gone to the police and things like that, the response has been, well, we can't, there's no way for us
No
to
mechanism.
like we don't have a mechanism to find out who this person is unless there's like something that gives it away.
But hang on,
more concrete. So that's where
yes.
I can see but
Yes.
as I'm assuming you're about to say, George, they're doing the right thing for the wrong reason.
Yes. So even like it will cut down on a certain level of defamation, but not all bullying is defamation. Like, Tom, if I call you a cuck fuckwit, like, that's not defamation. Well, maybe cuck actually would be, I don't know, to some degree, but to say like, you're a piece of shit and I hate you, like, that's bullying, but it's not defamation, right?
You insulting me would not be a case of defamation, but you, like, I don't know, you constantly finding every single, like, Twitter conversation that I have and repeatedly spamming every single person I know professionally in that conversation saying that I did something I didn't do or whatever. Yeah, like, that would be at least some form of, like, character assassination that would be maybe open to those kind of proceedings, and they're masked behind that.
Yes.
There's another aspect to this, though. Hang on, I'll let you say your point, but I'll jump back to that. So put a pin in what I was saying, George.
No, he's saying you go.
I was putting a pin in it.
I was saying you go.
That was, okay, let me pull the pin out. Hang on.
You were like tweaking a dial or something?
Let's not. Anyway.
What's going on right now? I'm so confused.
Are we all high? Did you just make us high, Tom? So as you're saying, the government, even when they do the right thing, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They're doing it for the ability to turn around and sue people that say things that they don't like about them. And in the lead up to an election, I think that's a deliberate strategy to have a chilling effect on the discourse. I'm someone who has been very critical of Peter Dutton because I think he's a evil sentient potato sent here to ruin our lives. But like, I can't say things like, I get nervous saying things like that now because I'm worried that if someone retweets some shit that I said about Peter Dutton from 4 years ago, then we're going to get in trouble. So the point is to have an obvious chilling effect on the discourse. And it's real bad when politicians go, like, this is the job, is you are at the center of power. And that means people will have opinions about the things that you say and do. And you are not going to like some of those opinions. Some of those opinions are going to be real nasty and hurtful and awful. And it's kind of the job that you need to have a bit of a thicker skin and not rise to every, piece of bait that people throw at you. Like, what sort of world do we live in where government ministers are just suing people left and right for saying shitty things about them on Twitter? Like, it's just like, this is public life to some degree. You can't, Well,
I guess I don't think it comes from a place of thin skin. I think it just comes more from a place of it's extra power. Like, to get to that sort of point of power, you got to kind of have a thing for power. And it's just an extra level of that, right?
But with government ministers who are notoriously thin-skinned, like, it's that power is very dangerous, I think.
Definitely.
Of the things that have ever happened in Australian social political life, nothing has concerned me as a podcaster more than what's going on here in the last couple of weeks. Like, it really does make me think, like, rethink how we can... Because I tell you right now, I haven't got 35 grand in my... Like, I know that Shane Barzy tweet, he got pinged for 35 grand. You go, it's only 35 grand. I don't have 35 grand to get pinged for right now. Like,
in the scheme of defamation payouts, it's relatively small,
right.
But it's more money than I have just on hand to throw at, like, a problem.
Never mind the legal fees and the associated, life-ruining aspects that would come with being sued by a government minister for some shit you said on Twitter. Like, I've got fucking 100 followers, man. Like, I can't.
I mean, the flip side of this is, though, and look, I kind of agree with the premise of it that, that in the online world there should be accountability for what you say. Us here on this podcast, while we're a comedy podcast, we should have to say things that are based on fact, or and if it's opinion, we need to state that it's opinion. The problem is at the moment, like, you just read the comment section of any fucking news article. It is, and especially stuff concerning, for instance, the pandemic, the voter ID, the pandemic, not voter ID stuff, the pandemic laws that have passed in Victoria. Some of the comments on that, and people aren't just like having a bit of a lull. They're like actively being like, no, this is what's happening.
Okay, but the
and
thing
this is
but
that, and
the
half the
people that are
information
still
wrong.
pushing misinformation is not defamation. Again, lies are not defamation, so it wouldn't necessarily do anything to impact those sorts of things. But it's just that the practicality of it means that like sensible people like us will probably shut our faces and try not to say dumb shit on Twitter in the hopes of not getting sued. And the people who don't give a shit and who are anonymized are going to keep doing whatever dumb, horrible, horrendous shit that they were doing anyway. So it's like the people that are really meant to be targeted by this law are people for whom it makes no difference. And
this is Labor's point of view.
How are you going to convince Twitter, like the practical aspects of it, how are you going to convince Twitter if Twitter says, George, you need to give us your photo ID and you need to verify that you're George? I'll say, fuck off, I'm not using Twitter. Like, or if it's someone from overseas, like, how are they going to make that work? Like, there's so many practical...
Just to put some clarity around it. So like, the details that they would be looking at would be a name, an email address, and a phone number. And
okay, but then you've got to have people that verify that and go through that. You've got to submit that information. You've got to keep a record of it. Like,
they already have that information.
Yeah, but like, what's to say that I just put Bob Fucklesticks, fart dealer 69. My phone number is 0411. Go fuck yourself. Like, how?
Yeah, that's probably where the legislation falls down, is that it doesn't probably go far enough. Another example in terms of what Labor, in terms of what Labor have said as well, is there are like 70 ways around it. So you could have a VPN, you could be overseas trolling from the illegal reach is only within Australia.
Yeah, which is also like part of the initial problem. Like, a lot of these companies aren't Australian companies, so they can't be compelled by Australian law in some of these
in Australia they can be compelled to a point, but you can't compel someone who's sitting in Azerbaijan to turn around and give their contact details. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So the distinctions are basically you've either got to have a complaints handling process if you're a social media organization, and that must be where you ask someone to provide their details if someone is seeking to seek defamation action. If the individual doesn't hand those details out, then the person, if they've got that much money, has to go and get a federal court order for the social media company to divulge that information. Now, the other interesting thing is where the company, so let's say Facebook, doesn't have a complaints handling process, they are then going to be liable for anything that is said on the platform. So for companies that don't have...
Publisher suddenly.
Yeah, so for companies that don't have one of these complaints handling processes, if you're publishing it, and this isn't just the person who's running the page, which the High Court decision showed earlier here in Australia, if you're the social media company, you are the one liable for Fart Dealer 69 going, George likes, I don't know, whatever. The insert mean example.
Insert defamatory comment.
So I'm sure all of these companies will probably will have a complaints handling process, but as George has said, as Tom has said, the issues are that there's about 30, 40 ways around it, and the second thing is, it's for people going after a defamation action. A defamation action is something you need to have some money behind you. To be able to do in the first place. You could send people cease and desist letters. I'm not sure whether that would count as a defamation action. But that's the other thing I'm not sure about is like, what does that mean?
It is
like, is it just me being like, I want to find out who this person is so I can send them a letter? Or is it, I want to serve them paperwork so I can go to court with them?
It is, the whole idea of it is that it is predicated on powerful, wealthy people being able to target and character assassinate, like, less wealthy people who have said shit online about them. Like, it is designed as a way of ministers of parliament being able to lash out and sue people that have defamed them. That is the point of it. And some people need to be anonymous, right? For various reasons. If you're a government whistleblower, I was going
to come back to
can so easily be abused. If you are a government whistleblower, right, or you're a marginalized, in a marginalized community, if you're in the closet, you're secretly a trans person, or you're secretly gay, and you have things to say about someone who's, abused you or said nasty things about you. And it's like, yes, it's not provable in a court of law, but like it happened to me and I'm going to tell my story. If all of a sudden you can be de-anonymized and sued for the things that you've said, well, a lot of shit that like, those Afghanistan, reports and all those sort of whistleblowers and things like that sort of came forward with stories about, Australian troops killing people overseas during these wartime operations, basically committing war crimes. Maybe those people don't come forward because they're like, the risk of getting sued for defamation on top of everything else or being unmasked is actually too great. Like, I don't want to do that because it puts me in harm's way. Like, there's a lot of reasons why people might want to be anonymous online.
That kind of interest situation, though, is like if you're going to make an actual claim where you're like alleging, you have to go on the record for that. You can't go off the record.
Well, like, but not necessarily to start it off. Like, the kind of the journalist would probably then be going onto the record writing about it, but the source that it came from, like, they keep sources like about that sort of stuff anonymous all the time. Like, how many times have we read about something coming out of the Trump White House that was from a person close to the matter,
right?
Rather than an actual name.
But that's not what's happening. Is what they're talking about in social media is people commenting on things, basically.
No, but it's the point of that person, if they hadn't just gone, they could go to someone from the Washington Post, or they could anonymously be putting the information up on Twitter.
Yes.
With people picking it up. Like, it's another mechanism to communicate. Like, there are a lot of marginalized people.
Like Facebook and Instagram, which are like, well, the comments there, but Twitter is probably the big one.
There are definitely times when I've seen a thread of someone talking about like being inside a government department and they're anonymized, they're not going to say who they are, but like, here's a thread about all the fucked up shit that's going on that you guys should know about. And that comes through on Twitter, on Reddit, on wherever. Like, if the government then has the power to turn around and unmask this person against their will, like, that's going to be devastating for transparency, for whistleblowers, for like, it's not a good law. Like, even though they're like the aim of like, I don't know, was there a defamation epidemic happening? Was there, it's just like people howling in the streets about, how Peter Dutton was defamed. Like, surely he Streisand affected the whole thing by suing some, like, the amount of people that saw Shane Barzi's tweet was a handful of people because he didn't have any followers. So like, by turning it into a national news story, now hundreds of thousands of people know about this story as a result of him creating a defamation action. And I don't think it was happening at such a scale where, like, obviously defamation is bad. It shouldn't be happening, but there are laws on the books for that. So I don't know, this ability to just...
Well, and laws on the books that are clunky.
It's opening a can of worms, right? If you start to unmask people, it's going to be used for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, and defamation laws are already, like, clunky and imperfect and can be quite abused already. And this won't help that. That's not going to make it better. This won't improve defamation laws.
The perfect process of defamation lawsuits, and let's unleash that at scale across the country. That definitely won't clog up the fucking courtrooms. That'll be an excellent use of everyone's time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, the only people who do really well out of it are the lawyers that fucking rake in. Morris Blackburn did very well out of this.
We do very well.
Yeah. And I thought there's another part of this. I don't think I shared an article about this actually, but it's just popped into my head that there's been other changes in some social media policies. I don't think not in a legislative sense, but like I think a new Twitter policy has come out where you can like requests for media of you to be taken down.
Mm-hmm.
That you can say someone has posted this picture of me that I don't want out there, and it's like going through the complaints process like we were talking about before. But while that's been designed in such a way that, to block things like revenge porn and things like that, like people posting things like that, that they've seen instances of like quite hard right factions abusing it in the sense of like having their criticism removed. And all those sorts of things. So, yeah, it's just all these systems will just sort of end up being abused in some sort of way, and that's where it's kind of tricky. I don't have a solution to this problem because
why not, Tom? Damn it!
Yeah, like what I said at the top.
What about the case of a domestic abuser? Right, a wife has left her husband, and she said true things about him online, and he unmasks her, and like, great, well, I know your location now, so I can serve you papers. And like, there's so many possible ways that this could be abused, and like, I don't know. I guess it's good that you want to do something about defamation, like, but yeah, like I said, whenever the Liberals do something good or halfway good, it's always for shitty, dumb, venal, personal reasons. Like, it's bad. It's just a bad, clunky law. I agree with the idea that
it's always a hands-off approach as well. It's like everything's going to be arm's length. Sure. We can't have any. Like, we'll get business to solve it for us. We won't do anything. Yeah, let the market decide what happens. Removing red tape, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And combined with Dutton's proposed, every minister should get a little allowance to sue those pesky tweeters. It's not looking great.
Yeah, a little defamation fund. I'm sure that won't be abused.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I do have some good news for you, though, that the voter ID laws have gone back in the bin, which is good.
Don't worry.
Excellent.
We'll see them. They'll come around in 3 or 4 in the next election cycle.
Next election cycle, when some Queensland backbench is pushing it through the national cycle.
These are zombie laws. They never really go away unless you properly sort of double tap their head. It comes back to haunt you every couple of years, every so often. Every now and then, there's a news report about a super fast train, and I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think we've had so many. It's happened like 5 times in my lifetime. We're like, no. This time is the time. We're absolutely getting a super fast train from Geelong to fucking Avalon or whatever. It's just like some useless route that nobody travels. And then, of course, 6 years pass, no train emerges. Like, this is just a conversation that we have to have in the newspaper every 5 to 7 years for whatever reason.
Plot to utopia.
Yes, legit.
Literally. So the voter ID laws were basically the history of it is kind of cooked. It's basically, there was some Queensland implemented voter ID laws like a couple of years ago. It was under the Newman government. Anyways, then there was a federal proposal for it, and they had several reviews into that.
Was this as a result of the voter fraud that Pauline Hanson perpetrated? Was convicted for?
Anyway.
I know.
So someone's been pushing it basically within the Liberal national ranks, so which is why it's probably coming back up. And I think the final review out of whatever commission they had, parliamentary committee that was looking at this, finally came out. So they're like, oh, let's do it. Obviously, it's a terrible idea. The costs far outweigh the benefits. So,
and all it really does is just allow people to like force people not to vote. Like, not force people not to vote, but to really make it a lot harder for people to vote who probably vote against them.
It's not even that. Like, you could rock up with when they say ID, it's like you could rock up with a phone bill. Like, the problem is that it doesn't actually do what. There is no problem for it to be there in the first place. And then the second part of it is the problem, again, similar to that social media thing. The solution you're coming up with isn't even adequate to solve whatever alleged problem.
It doesn't even solve the fake problem that you made up. Like
it's just bad.
I'm doing a master's at the moment, and one of the subject I'm doing at the moment is called design thinking, right? And the whole point behind design thinking is that you put the user at the center of the process, and you try and develop your products around the user to help them to solve the problems that they have in their lives, right? So it's not like you come up with I'm going to build a scooter and I'm going to sell it to someone. You speak to someone who's got like a disability, and you say, how would you like to move around? Is this useful? You make a prototype. Does this work for you? Oh, okay, we'll change this, this, and this. You design the thing around the human that it solves a problem for, right? That's the crux of it. And at no point does this government ever design legislation that way. It's just kind of like, what's the problem? Don't know. We'll figure it out. Here's the solution that we made up. It's like the opposite of what a good design policy process would look like.
Well, or the problem that they think it's solving isn't the one that you would think it is.
It solves a
voter ID laws do not make voting any easier or more convenient for the people who vote.
And that's not
The
the
ironic
point
thing
of it.
is they wouldn't be turning under these laws, by the way, just to go back and cover old Grandy. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't here, but they wouldn't actually be turning people away from the booths either. You would have to then go, if you didn't have ID, if you rocked up just with like a shirt and no pants on, like, or whatever the case was.
Which is a very real possibility here in Australia. Someone rocks up to the voting booth in a wife beater with no shoes. That's definitely something that could happen.
If that happens, you wouldn't get turned away. You would then have to go do a declaration vote. But the interesting thing is the declaration votes don't get counted till after the election. So that's where it's an interesting, I guess, fudging of the numbers, so to speak.
We'll get you to just pop your vote in the means nothing box over here. Yeah, just the means nothing. And just over here, so your vote doesn't count.
Yeah. Anyway, thank God the laws have been dropped. There is some sense. Jackie Lambie blocked it basically, along with Labor and the Greens.
What world do we live in where Jackie Lambie is the voice of reason? What is happening?
She's the voice of reason, man. She's the mum of Australia, coming to like fuck shit up. She's there. But Labor did a bit of a deal though with the Libs on this. And it was kind of like, well, we won't support you on this, but we will support you on a bill regarding the declaration of charities and their donations to federal political campaigns. So what that is it's a political campaign bill which will aim to lower the threshold for entities such as charities to disclose political spending. So under the deal struck between the Coalition and Labor, the proposed legislation was changed to raise the new disclosure threshold from 100,000 to 250,000. So they've actually, it's already something that's been tabled. They've just said, if you amend it this way, we'll support it. Which is currently the threshold is 500,000, so 250. And they've renamed political campaigners to significant third party to allay concerns charities' status would be under threat for their advocacy. Basically, what they're trying to say is it's a target for Get Up and those kind of lefty, and for Greenpeace and all these kind of charitable organisations which do make they're registered as charities under Australian law, but they
have a political agenda.
They're advocacy groups.
Greenpeace. Pieces of shit. Oh, they want humanity to survive global warming. What a shitty political agenda by a bunch of pricks. They want to save animals. What bastards.
Australian Youth Climate Foundation and Farmers for Climate Action, those kind of groups that have been sort of in the background lobbying, would then have to declare their donations if it's over 250,000. Now, I personally think $1 should be declared.
Yes.
In my opinion. I think everything should be declared. So I'm actually not that much against it. But as we said, for every other piece of legislation here, the reason why they're doing it is not for good purposes. It's just so it'll help them at the next election, where you'll see on the front of the Murdoch media, it'll be Greenpeace donated to the fucking Labor movement, and it's just going to be a slag campaign.
Let's be honest, probably to the Greens, not Labor. But exactly.
Whatever.
That's the point of it, is to have, a cudgel to bash the political opposition with, to say, you're in the pocket of Get Up, you're in the pocket of whatever organization that we say is that Murdoch has and his propaganda apparatus has been saying is full of communists for the last 3 years. Like, it's it's transparent, it's obvious, but that doesn't mean that people won't fall for it and won't listen to and pay attention to the headlines when they come up.
I should clarify. I'm not sure if Get Up are actually classed as a charity. There might be a
whatever. I'm just using that as a for instance. But you know what I'm saying. Yeah. There are definitely charities that, if Oxfam had to vote one side or the other, they're not voting for the Liberals, right? You know what I mean? Like, clearly there are charities that would align themselves with one side of politics or the other, depending on what their issue is and how it's framed. And
the whole charity sector is really pissed off with this bill.
Yeah, of course.
Please no one.
But I agree with you. Anyway. Like, in principle, I think every dollar that's donated, I actually don't think there should be political donations. I think we should run publicly funded elections, and that should be the end of it. Like, the idea of money in politics of any sort just makes me feel gross. Like, I just don't think it is inevitable that having foreign money funding politics would corrupt the system. Like, there is not a way to do it without creating corruption, right? So with that said, like, surely, because there is some public funding for elections based on, the amount of membership that you have and the amount of votes that you get. You do get some level of money from the government for the next election.
Not enough, though. It's not enough to really run an effective campaign.
Okay, but like, then that's what you get. Like, or we increase the amount to where it's a sensible amount to run a national political campaign. Or maybe you get what you get and you have to deal with it. Like, and you have to go and say things on public radio and television that people want to hear and create policies that attract, more people, and then they'll vote for you so you can, get more seats and then get more money to fund your election. Like, this is how democracy is supposed to work.
Fucking Jeffrey.
Is if you say popular things, then you get more votes and attention and money. Like, that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Alas.
Essentially.
What do you think, Tom? Do you reckon charities should... I'm not sure what the comparison is, actually, whether or not, like, if you're a business, whether the same rules apply. But do you think charities should have to declare if they're donating to a political campaign?
Oh, definitely. Like, I feel... I don't think more transparency is usually not a bad thing. Like, that we all, like, understand what's going on. Like, it's the like, I feel I couldn't sit here and say, oh, no, they should be allowed to just give the money and we have no idea this week, when weeks ago we're talking about $1 million being given to Christian Porter by who knows who.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's exactly that. Like, if we should know these sorts of things.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, that they're going after charities, because, like, I very much doubt any charities are supporting LNP ministers. They're just like,
well,
Australians for a freer coal society. Like, I don't know what the charity could be that would be supporting.
There would be religious ones that would potentially be supporting coalition members. So that would be interesting. But whether or not they'd be donating, into the hundreds of thousands remains to be seen. But I mean, that's the other thing, is that, like, all they would do is just do, donations of 200,000. I can't do math.
$49,999.
Yeah.
There's watching the Big Deal film, which we talked about a couple of years ago, which you guys definitely check out. I believe it's on iView at this stage. So if you're here in Australia, Big Deal, by Craig Rucastle. It's definitely concerning how much money is flowing into our politics. That is, like, doesn't get declared for a good 18 months after the donation has actually taken place, and B, the amount of it that is just not declared at all. Like, there's a certain portion based on the rules and how they're constructed and how it currently is, that, like, a portion, maybe about a third, gets declared later on by the time everyone's forgotten about it. And a good, like, 2/3 of it is just never, we're never, as the public, never ever informed as to who gave this money to whom and for what reason.
Which is always why, like, you see, halfway through a cycle where there'll be, like, a story that comes out. It's like, oh, this person received $1 million for this thing. And it's like, well, why did we know about this before? It's because the reporting cycles are all...
Yeah, which is on purpose, right? They want it to be, like, past the point of being useful. So if you do want to suss out the Big Deal film, which goes into this in a lot more depth, and I would recommend it, go to madmanfilms.com.au/big-deal. Is it -big-deal?
Now, gentlemen, do we want to go global, or do we want to stay with the federal government, assuming we're talking about them already?
I mean, well, what about the federal government? Do you want to talk about
just that
someone growled at someone? Like, that was wild this week.
I saw that clip where the senator said, "I unreservedly apologize for doing the thing that you mentioned."
Is that when they were growling at Jackie Lambie during was it Jackie Lambie?
Yeah, they growled at her like a dog kind of thing. Like I was just like, are you guys... I saw that clip and I was just like, are you adults? You're at work. Stop it. You're at work.
There was the person the guy growling, and then there was a Green senator allegedly told a Liberal senator at least they keep their legs shut. What wild. Like the kind of like
Yeah.
horrid bullshit that was being thrown around by everyone this
Yeah.
week. It's like, oh man, our government's fucked.
Sir,
Like,
this is
just-
a Wendy's.
Like, Jesus Christ.
Well, this is probably a good segue into the fact that the government ministers in the lead up, several government ministers, when I say several, I mean 3, a lead up to, actually one of them is no longer a minister, I should clarify. Christian Porter's no longer a minister, but...
Well, and that's 3 this week that we know of, not, that have either disappearing at the next election or have stood down, because others have announced it already.
Yeah.
Like, George Christensen ages ago said he wasn't contesting the next election. Can't come soon enough.
So there are these big government ministers that are, and it does happen at the end of every election cycle that there are exits, but it's interesting that, we're still a couple of months out and they're making these calls now to leave. Greg Hunt's going.
The rats are fleeing the sinking ship, it seems
Yes.
like. It definitely feels like a lot of people are just yeeting the fuck out of there. It's like, well, see you guys. Good luck with the next election and all, but I need to go and get paid 3 times the salary to work doing nothing at a law firm. So I'll just see you never.
Go do some consulting where I will consult on things
I need to spend more time with one of my several families.
So part of what those three people left. Christian Porter said, "Nah, I'm not coming back because I've been through the ringer and." Obviously, he's probably been quietly pushed out as well to a point. Greg Hunt has just gone, I can't be fucked, and I've got a sweet consulting job coming up probably.
The problem is Greg Hunt is so short that how do you know if he stepped down?
How do you know he stepped down? I don't know.
Is Greg Hunt short?
He's pretty short.
He's a short guy.
I've never seen him in person.
Also, and
every time I see him, it's usually the waist up in a press conference.
I literally looked. There was a press conference today that he was in. I was looking at it and announcing he's the health minister. They were talking about, stuff to do with the pandemic. They were talking to the guy who was speaking before him and he goes, and I'll hand over to the health minister, Greg Hunt. Greg Hunt walks into frame and the camera literally panned down.
Oh no.
It literally panned down to capture his head in the screen. I was like, damn, Greg Hunt is short.
And look, he has been dealing with the pandemic for the last 2 years. So, I mean, that would weigh
anyway. Has he?
But...
Has he though? Remember those vaccines we didn't have for a long time? Whose responsibility was that again?
Stressful.
Man, the amount of times
really
that I've woken up like a full year into a crisis and been like, oh, fuck, we should order some vaccines. Fuck. Oh, just get them on the bill. They're happy to take, 20 million vaccine orders now, aren't they? What do you mean I missed several meetings with them? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, boy. Being a health minister is real hard.
Oh, it's real hard, you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it is if you're doing it properly.
Yeah, if you actually care about doing the job. It would be hard, one imagines.
So anyway, Greg Hunt's out. And Alan Tudge has been, I think he was actually sort of stood down. As a minister, of course, he retains his seat on the backbench because that would be
Oh, yeah, there's different standards of conduct depending, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it must be wild as a backbencher. All the fucked up shit that you can do. Just doing lines off strippers. Just getting shit-faced at all the Christmas party. Backbenchers, that's where it's at. You're getting paid a good salary. You have no fucking responsibility whatsoever. And there is almost literally no conduct that can get you kicked out. It sounds like the perfect job.
Well, I mean, there's some stuff like I feel you're obligated to do as a backbencher, which I feel is shit stirring. Like there's always a backbencher that has to be the one who's being like, oh no, but I'm not happy about blah, just to just throw a spanner in the works occasionally.
Yeah. So as a backbencher, you only need to master one phrase, and that's I don't know about that.
I'll have to look at the review.
I don't know.
What about the Queensland coal miners?
What about the quiet Australians?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Quiet Australians. Oh, God. Mr. Tudge has been accused of essentially sexual assault.
Emotional abuse, I believe.
Abuse.
I think further comments from, we talked about it a while ago in one of the Four Corners reports just about alleged nefarious activities among ministers in Parliament House, some involving allegations around Christian Porter and others around, I believe, was Alan Tudge having an affair with a staffer.
Mm-hmm.
Sent
And I
an
think
affair
it's-
in 2017.
I would just like to
And yeah, and
clarify.
I think it's the same staffer who's made these follow-up
Correct.
comments
Yes.
that led to Alan Tudge
Yeah.
step down. Yeah.
Rochelle Miller. So I would like to clarify.
Yeah.
It wasn't sexual assault. It was just regular garden variety
Oh,
assault.
sorry. Yeah, just garden variety assault.
Just while
sorry.
we're talking about ministers having the ability to to sue people, I just would like to clarify.
Yeah,
it was
no,
just
my bad.
regular
bad.
kind of assault that's being
Regular
alleged,
assault.
a regular assault. Just your garden variety that's been
And what-
alleged against Alan Tudge.
I should be. I would have probably arrived at this point as well, but yeah, basically what she's alleged is that when they were in bed in a hotel, she got a phone call, woke him up, and he like kicked her out and then swore at her and said a bunch of mean
But
things.
gave her a kicking sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
kicked her.
She's also
Yeah.
alleged a bunch of emotional manipulation and abuse in terms of her performance. There was a review done by the finance department a couple of years ago into the issue, and she wasn't really involved in that review, so they sort of found that everything was unsubstantiated. But
yeah. Well, if you don't involve the alleged victim, of course everything sounds like it's above board. Doesn't sound like anything went wrong. It all seems like nothing happened. Have you talked to the person who made the complaint?
Yeah, Tom. I heard Adam was stealing millions of dollars from the government. Did you have any comment about that or?
Oh, well, to my knowledge, I don't think Adam's ever stolen anything ever. But, I wouldn't... don't check with him, though.
No, he's right here.
But... No, don't check with Adam, and don't mind this new Rolex that he got me. But, yeah, no, Adam's never done anything. Case closed.
Seems on board, above board to me.
Yeah, it's perfect. All right, anyway, I got to go. I got to catch a flight with Adam to Vegas.
that was well played. I like the Rolex reference. That was good. So yeah, she's come forward again with I guess further allegations and that as sort of kicks she's been stood down pending a review as they did with Christian Porter.
Stood down so the inquiry can happen
by the Prime Minister's office. So the Prime Minister's office, as they did with Christian Porter, is going to review Alan Tudge. God, I'm getting them all the white guys confused. So
all the white alleged abusers in Parliament, they all blend together.
Anyway,
man,
there's
wild,
review underway.
Absolutely wild.
So
it's so Alan Tudge.
There was also that report, I thought as well, I forget the name of it, that came out. Yeah, the Jenkins review that came out with the stat that 1 in 3 staffers at Parliament House had experienced sexual harassment.
Yeah, the Jenkins review is absolutely fucking damning. So they didn't want to have an ICAC, but this is the Jenkins review that they initiated after the Brittany Higgins allegations came out in March.
Oh, and I heard this week that Scott Morrison said thank you to Brittany Higgins for coming forward, which is weird because Linda Reynolds called her a lying cow. That's weird.
And it's also weird because she came forward at the time.
Yes.
And then it was covered up.
Yeah, and then you did nothing about it.
And then she came out again, and now you're thanking her for that time, but not the first time.
No.
And I don't get why these are different. They shouldn't have been.
We're thanking her for initiating the very public women's protest movement, which we can't ignore. But
it's like, yes, thank you for no, fuck you for bringing it up internally when we could have managed all this sort of stuff in a right, sensible sort of way rather than bearing it. But thank you very much for bringing it up so publicly.
Love it.
This
Thanks.
is me, Scotty.
Thanks. Love it. Love your work.
Yeah. Happy I'm being, my government's being dragged through the media. Wasn't happy when you brought it up with your managers.
Something he said earlier this week as well, that he was like, sadly, I'm not surprised at the report's details. And I was like, well, if you weren't surprised, why didn't you do anything about it? But anyway.
Yeah. To say I'm upset, these figures are awful, but I hate to say I'm not surprised. I'm like, what?
Why? What?
What?
Why are you not surprised?
Not surprised? Do you know how fucked that is?
I'd just like to say, someone should really be in charge of this place and maybe, do something about me. It's me. I'm in charge. Oh, fuck.
Me? Fuck.
Well, great. Well, thanks for bringing it to my attention. I'll make sure to not have a rapey workplace in future. Thanks, guys. Thanks for that.
So, I mean, Scott Morrison has to own this report because it's the one that he basically directed them to do.
I would be a little
Yeah, but
surprised.
he's not gonna, is he though? If there's one person that I feel would commission a report and then somehow find a way to weasel out of taking any accountability for it, it's Scotty.
And Kate Jenkins basically said like, hey, you can't cherry pick the fun parts of this review that you want to implement. It only works if you implement all of the findings together as a package.
This? Scotty, this isn't a banking royal commission. You got to kind of do all of it.
Yeah. Some things.
So there are 28.
Some things are permanent, Scotty. Tattoos, tattoos, marriage. These things are serious. Okay, yeah, these things are permanent. It's not like a banking royal commission. You can't just whip one out every couple of years when you get in trouble.
Love a good royal commission.
It's got to mean something.
28 recommendations were in the report, and they cover things like gender and diversity targets, rules around alcohol consumption, codes of conduct, respect in chambers, and extra support services for people that work there, basically.
Cool. Just learning that respect in chambers wasn't part of the code of conduct until
apparently.
Apparently, respect is optional in the chambers.
Yeah. So. Obviously, there's some stuff there they'll need to work through. I think he will implement that stuff because it would be pretty fucking weird if it's the report that he personally commissioned.
Yeah,
he has to follow through on it. He can't sit around and go.
They'll implement it though after the election. If we're re-elected, we'll do all the stuff that they say we should do in the thing that I commissioned.
But also, like, just because you implement something doesn't mean you don't have you can't do it half-heartedly. Right? Like,
it's just like, all right,
you don't have to
you're not allowed, fellas, you can't drink as much at work anymore. Wink, wink.
Don Draper, put the whiskey away. What are you doing, mate?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. The whole thing is.
I read a statement on the the Prime Minister's website, basically, and they said that they're going to be looking at bipartisan approach to getting it solved. And getting some regulations in place.
Which means we can blame Labor for it if it goes wrong.
Basically.
I feel the fact that they have to say we're going to look at some bipartisan ways to implement this sort of stuff implies that they do see this as potentially a partisan issue, like not abusing women on staff.
Yeah, we're on the anti-rape side of politics.
And I worry which side is on the pro side.
Call me controversial. We're definitely, I don't care who hears it, definitely anti-rape. Big fan of not raping.
Yeah, I think obviously Tudge's being stood down obviously is timed with this report's release. They could hardly release the report and then have this happening at the same time. They've tried that before. It didn't work. So anyway, so that's been probably the week in federal politics, at least. Anyway, there's probably other stuff going on as well.
There's probably a litany of other bullshit going on, but we are but mortal men.
A friend of mine said to me, "Oh man, the amount of LNP ministers that are bowing out this week, they're dropping like flies." I said, "Well, yeah, flies do typically tend to hang around shit, so it makes sense."
Boom!
Got to bed around 2:30.
2:30. But all that doesn't matter, gentlemen, because we're going international now, and whether or not you guys knew, but there's a bit of a debt crisis brewing in China.
Fine, everything's fine.
Everything's fine. I love a good debt crisis. It's never come back to bite us in the bum in the past.
It's fine. Don't worry. You know how you're thinking about it? Don't think about it.
Yeah. George, this ad-laden article that you've given us.
Holy cow, it is ad-laden.
It's a lot of ads.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got my ad blocker on, and it says it's blocked 63 advertisements on this website. So it is. And there's still ads that I can see. So there you go.
I mean, yeah.
So do you want to give the listeners a rundown on what the debt crisis they're talking about in China is? We've talked about it briefly on the show before. We're not really gone in depth.
Yeah, so China's largest property developer, Evergrande, faces now it's listed in pounds, so $221 billion billion pounds of debt, so probably closer to half a trillion, something around that. What's a half a trillion between friends? Somewhere between 400 and $500 billion Australian dollars worth of debt. And one expert claimed that the company's collapse could spark the fall of the entire financial system. So they've missed
That expert.
Worrying.
Should we name the expert? Because I feel like we just say a random expert. It's a bit
an
sort of-
expert, trust me. So Dr. Marco Metzler from Deutsche Markscreening Agentur, DMSA. So that sounds legit to me. So it's not good. So remember a couple of weeks ago we mentioned that they'd missed, whatever it was, $100 million worth of payments.
Their payment.
Now it's significantly more than that.
Going from 100 million in payments to 221 billion.
So it's 110 million pounds that they've missed in payments to date. So it's 200 and something million Australian. So, we said when we discussed it, whatever it was, a month or two ago, like, watch what happens and see if these, other payments get missed. And they keep missing payments, and we're like, stay tuned, see what happens. And they keep missing payments, and we're like, stay tuned, see watch for the impending financial apocalypse. So it doesn't seem like the Chinese government is going to bail them out. Obviously, the property sector in China is worth about $55 trillion.
It's worth a lot.
That seems not bubble-like at all. So
it also coincides with the rise of the middle class in China and stuff. Like the property sector in China has gone gangbusters. It also, the Chinese investors invested in Australia a lot during the 2010s.
Yeah,
there's a lot of money in property in China.
There's a lot of reasons why it is the primary wealth vehicle for most families in China. There's a number of different reasons. There's a great Economics Explained video on this if you'd like to go into more detail about it. But essentially, at some point, if they keep missing payments, they're going to default on this debt, and bad shit is going to happen with the Chinese property market, which is going to have massive effects on the global economy worldwide. And this is kind of like, remember a couple of years ago when the pandemic started, Adam said, it's not the thing, right, that causes the problem. It's the second order effects. The pandemic itself is going to cause a lot of problems, but it's the political instability, the economic uncertainty, these other second order effects that come about as a result of the pandemic that are going to cause the real historical problems. And I feel like we're starting to see that.
I don't remember that, but anyway.
You're a genius. In my recollection.
Yeah, Adam's like, I don't remember saying something that coherent
it's true,
and intelligent.
But it is very coherent and very true, so I'm very surprised.
Well, you've been credited with the quote. It was either you or Oscar Wilde. It's always one of those two. So or Gandhi, maybe. And so essentially, this is what we're talking about. Those second order effects are finally sort of bearing fruit, and it could be the collapse of the Chinese economy. And a lot of people say oh, China, fucking coronavirus, fuck them. Which that kind of nuanced hot take you might see on social media or somewhere in Queensland. Now might be sued for defamation. But it's not good because China's basically everyone's largest trading partner. So if the Chinese economy goes into the toilet, everyone else is going to follow. So
what they're worried about is a credit crunch, basically. So if Evergrande defaults or collapses, then no one's going to be willing to lend money to these kind of investments. And there are, it's not just Evergrande, there are 12 to 20 other major firms about their size. Evergrande is the biggest of them. But, if that one goes, if the first domino falls, the question is, are banks really going to be willing to extend lending conditions or anything else for all these other organizations?
Yeah, it's going to be a credit crunch. Very similar to what we saw in the global financial crisis. All of this free, easy money flowing in. All of a sudden, people can't meet their debt obligations, foreclosures, all the companies that backed up, that did insurance for those, bundled investments are all also going to hell and going to go out of business, and it's got flow on effect. It's going to be that times 10, basically, because it's so much larger than the American property sector at the height of the global financial crisis 10 years ago.
There are some people that argue that China is insulated to a point from the rest of the economy. But
it is more insulated from the global economy than the Americans are, certainly. But like I said, I'm not joking when I say they're basically everyone's largest trading partner. For most countries in the world, China is their largest trading partner. So whatever happens there, if people have got money to spend or not, or invest into factories or not, like that's going to have massive ripple effects across the world economy. And I don't know that I'd find myself rooting for the Chinese typically, but I really hope they get through this and they figure this out, because if they don't, it's going to be real bad for everyone. As George Carlin had a joke, he goes, other countries care about our politics because they don't want to be a victim of our foreign policy. It's like it's a similar kind of situation with China. Like what they do in their economy has effects on us, on people in the Asia Pacific region, but also the economy more broadly. So,
and look, because of those investments in Australia, like there are significant Chinese property investments, particularly in areas of Melbourne. Like half of Docklands, was bought up and funded by Chinese investors, for instance. If and I don't know, and that was 10 years ago and that kind of thing. But whether or not those individuals and corporations are still holding on to those investments, I'm not sure. But if they are, and they've also got their fingers in the pie in various Chinese, local, investments, if they all start to, if the dominoes start to fall over there, does that then affect, us here in Australia, where all of a sudden half of, Docklands or other apartment dwellings are just suddenly for sale, where banks are reclaiming loans,
Yeah, I remember reading an article a couple of years ago which talked about land banking. Basically, people from China buying up property here. And by the way, to be clear, China is not even Australia's largest investor when it comes to property. I think that's still the United States or something like that. I think they're third or fourth. But like, we're still talking huge amounts of money pouring in that wouldn't otherwise into our local housing sector. But the idea that that people would buy land or an apartment or whatever, not even put tenants in there, just for the understanding that the value of that investment's going to rise by whatever it is, 10% a year, like a stock. It's going to rise 10% a year every year on year from now ad infinitum. This bubble's going great. Nothing can ever pop the bubble, and they wouldn't even put tenants on this land or on this apartment because it wasn't worth the hassle of fucking around for 10 grand a year worth of rent. So they were basically just using this as a way of parking money here in Australia, where it was safe and stable and not overseas.
Yeah, Dan Andrews had a policy a couple of years ago to try and sort of stop that, I think. But I think also the State Revenue Office clamped down on a lot of overseas investments as well a couple of years ago. Also around the time of the Royal Commission, so it's sort of slowed down. The heat off that aspect has definitely slowed down, but. Yeah, look, Tom, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? A Docklands apartment, waterfront apartment? How are you feeling about that? Do you want to potentially get on the action?
I mean, that'd be pretty cool. I just think I have a solution to this problem for the whole thing, and it's a $55 trillion coin. Because it can solve all our problems.
All right, okay.
We can just.
It's funny though, because in China,
made up money into it, and then we just don't have to break anything. Like,
all right.
The communist government in China, this is the thing, is that they're more likely, I would have thought, going to be inclined to do something like that than a Western democracy.
I think, if anything, the Chinese government is harsher, right? They would rather see a particular company collapse and just kind of take a very sort of almost libertarian view of it, like, okay, well, if you fucked up, you're the one who suffers the consequences, rather than sort of, socializing that debt. I know they're meant to be socialists, but I do see that the Chinese government has been pretty ruthless in regards to stomping down their tech sector lately and things like that. So I don't know that they're if you're looking for help from the Chinese government as a business, I wouldn't expect to get any. So it's interesting,
complicated
and scary. Yeah.
$55 trillion coin.
I really feel like this is one of those stories that's just going to kind of fly under the radar, and it's not going to be a story until something big happens.
Until the world explodes.
Yeah, and it explodes the financial sector, and then it will be the only story for,
Well, that's how it kind of worked with the pandemic. It was saw some reports in December that the Chinese were locking down cities. You're like, what? What's going on? And then by March, it was on us.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happened. The global financial crisis, there were a couple of key events in it, but it did drag, like it would sort of happen over a period of time. From the sort of initial starting, I mean, not the root causes, but the collapse of some of those,
Lehman Brothers and
from when those
Stearns.
organizations collapsed, like it sort of dragged on for about a year from memory. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's a lot.
On that note, on the point of potential pending financial apocalypse, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you rate us in your podcatcher of choice if you haven't already, because it does help people find the show. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
You can follow us all down to the head offices of Evergrande in order to see what's going on with their payments.
They're running out of money, apparently.
Just checking in, see what's going on with that invoice I sent you. Just checking in. Just want to loop back around and check in on you while we check in.
Circle back,
put a pin in it, just checking in just to see if you'd paid that invoice. Just curious to see if you got my last email as per the above. So thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.
$55 trillion coin. It'll solve everything.